today we're going to have Jeff White come in and speak to you guys about the basics of banking and money management. So give a warm welcome to Jeff White.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Great. I'm Jeff. I'm a film producer, and I've been working for many, many years on budgets for movies. And so when I saw that the first part of the program on the next slide is budgeting, I was thinking, what are you guys working on in terms of budgeting yourselves right now that would be kind of interesting for this topic that we're talking about, and then everything else dealing with it too. And what I was thinking is that when you guys go to lunch each day, and this is just a question for all of you, how do you pay for your lunch? Because there's sort of a budget involved in this question. It deals with income and expenses, which we're going to talk about. Income is the money that comes in. And how do you guys get money to pay for your lunch? Have you thought about it, or do you know how that works? Okay. Okay, so I'm hearing parents. And how do you think the parents get the money that goes into the card that you guys do it? Okay, that's right. Okay, so working creates income for all of you guys. And so the idea of income is how do you get the money that comes in to start and then filter down through. And then the other question is expenses. Income versus expenses is what this is saying here. And expenses would be the cost of your lunch. So if you guys were all having a conversation with your parents and they said, we're going to give you a budget, what should your budget for lunch be each day? And do you guys know what the cost of the meal is here? $7? $8. $8? Well, you're 9. 7, 8, okay.
Well, if you add like a drink, it might be a little more.
Okay. So the drink and the meal are different expenses. The meal might be, I don't know, like a hot dog or a pizza or something more healthy than that. And you guys will figure out the cost of that. And that's an expense. That's an example of an expense that you guys can all relate to right now. And then the drink is an expense as well. And this is the same thing that we do in business in every way. We deal with expenses and we deal with income in order to figure out how we can come up with a budget to make things work. And it really applies to almost anything in business. And the goal is if you guys are given a card and you have a budget, and let's say it's $8 a day for your meal, and your meal really only costs you $6, that's great. You guys are doing really, really well, and that's perfect. But if you get like 5 or 6 drinks on top of your regular meal and it's like $15, you're going to have a problem with your budget. You're going to see that the next day when you go by to buy your second meal, you may have spent all the money from the day before. That makes sense to all of you, doesn't it? And the same thing really works in business as well. In terms of business income and expenses, people try to figure out from a standpoint, I do it in terms of motion pictures, we try to figure out the expenses of every movie star that's going to be in the movie and the director and how much we're going to pay for the script and everything. We whip it all together and we say, do we have enough money to make the product that we're going to do? If you guys were going to make another product, what would you, like if you guys were going to do a company together, like a club company, what would be of interest to you, you think? Any thoughts? Well, how did you guys do the meal that was out here? I'm going back to food again. I guess it's lunchtime, thinking about it. Did some people bring in the meal, or did you kind of have a company set up to figure out how to do it? How did that work, the meal out here? Anybody?
Well, I know that Avery and Ruby made and brought in the food, and I don't think that they had any company to bring some stuff in. But I don't know if they checked in with somebody. I'm not sure if that's as much as I know.
Well, that's good. So they worked out a plan.
Right.
And sometimes when you guys are setting up a business, you'll do what's called a business plan. And the plan is to try to figure out if you're doing a meal or if you're going to do like a record or something, what all of your expenses are going to be for the musicians and all the other people in your business plan, so that you can come up with something that will work out. So basically, are you guys getting the idea of the concept of a budget? Is it clear to everybody? Well, I'm delighted. That is great. So let's go on to our next topic here real quick, and then if we have time, we'll go back and obviously we'll do questions. I think the next thing has to do with banking. And in talking about the ways that checking accounts work first, how many of you have a checking account? Just like a show of hands. Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And we really now have debit cards and credit cards. And does everyone know the difference between a credit card and a debit card? Because there is a difference. Okay, so do you know? Okay, so what is it?
Like debit, I think, is when you put a certain amount of money on the card that you can spend, and once you're out of it, you can't like use it anymore.
That's
You're
right.
able to add more, but credit, you can use it many times and it'll get billed to your house, or like you can use it like.
That's true. But with the credit, it does have to get paid when it goes to the
It has
house.
to get paid eventually, but like you can keep using it.
That's right. But when you set up your accounts, and for those of you who've set it up, how many of you have like a teen checking account? That's what I have. Do you guys believe me? No, I don't. But anyway, but you guys do. You guys have teen checking accounts? And you know that you have to watch your bank balance. Does the bank tell you when you guys are running low? No. Okay. Well, depending on where you go, the bank, they can tell you. You can get an application. I know that Wells Fargo, they send you credit limits. Different banks will let you know. And the idea with the checking account or the credit account, again, goes back to the budgeting, that you want to try to maintain enough of a bank balance. That's the amount of money that's in your account, so that each time you make a purchase, you know that you have enough to cover the full amount. Does that make sense to everybody? Great. Now, savings accounts. How many people have savings accounts? Oh, a lot. Okay.
I think I have a savings account, not a checking account.
That's okay.
I just got a little, yeah.
And does your savings account, does that have a debit card attached to it as well?
It's from my aunt, so.
Right. Should we call her?
Maybe.
Or? I'm just kidding.
Maybe, yeah. We're on a lot of our phones, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Okay. I won't hold you to that. And someone else want to talk about their savings account? Anybody? Do you want to say something?
I'm pretty sure the only money that's in it is from my bar mitzvah.
Okay, which is good. That makes a lot of sense. That's good. And then would you want to say
Also,
something?
like, I don't know, my parents have saving accounts for me and my brothers for like college.
Right.
No.
Okay, that is
I
fabulous.
got my
That's good. And then we continue.
Doesn't it usually, you usually should set up a savings account when you like get a large amount of money, right?
Well, that would be
From
wonderful.
something?
That would be wonderful to do that with a large amount of money. And what would you say
Yeah,
about
I
that?
have a savings account like my bar mitzvah money and my allowance and everything, but I'm not going to go pay it up to college, so.
Well, that is absolutely fabulous. And I can tell all of you that if you are able to put something in it, and it only works if you have enough extra. In other words, first of all, you have to take care of your daily expenses. And so the most important thing is to be able to eat. And so eating food, we've talked about this with the different accountants. They say that when people are in their houses, the first thing they need to do is worry about is their food. They have to be able to eat. And all of us, we hopefully we can, so we don't worry about that issue. But that's the first thing. And then there's a whole number of priorities after that that we go through as we're spending our money in our savings account and our checking accounts. But it is great if you guys can start to save, and then the idea, do you guys know about interest in the savings account?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, lately, the interest rates have been very, very low. I mean, like ridiculously low. But they're going to get a little bit better over time. You can see that even now, they're a little bit higher than they were probably a year ago or 2 years ago. And the idea with your savings account is that the interest in your savings account, if you have an amount of money, will help contribute and compound to grow a larger and larger bank balance for you. So when you have like your college education, or you want to buy your first car, or maybe you guys already have cars, maybe you want to buy something different, a house or something, it's good to have your money in your savings account and have your interest working with it to help make that a greater thing. I'm noticing another thing here with the savings account is that there's minimum balances. And that is true. For those of you who haven't set up a bank account, you need to have a certain amount of money to open up the bank account. I called Wells Fargo, which I'm not particularly thrilled about that bank. I have some accounts there, but I'm not thrilled with that bank. But Wells Fargo, for a teen account, you need $25. You guys know that? So you need $25 in order to be able to open up the account. And then when they talk about minimum balances for the teen account, at least at Wells Fargo, you don't have to have a minimum balance more than like a penny in the account. Do you have a question about the balance?
No, is it $25 that you have to have that much in the account, or is it to pay to set up the account?
Just to pay to set up the account. But you keep that money. In other words, you go into the bank with your barrel of $25, and they take it, But they don't take it away. That stays in your account. But they just want to know, work till you're 18 years old. And then after that, you'll get a regular adult account. And at that point in time, in order to avoid the interest charges that it's not an interest charge, it's a banking charge. I think at Wells Fargo, it's $20 a month if you have less than the minimum balance that they require. And depending on what type of account you have, it's different. But you guys always want to try, if you can, not to fall into those types of fees, because they really add up over time. And so if you start really good banking habits now, and again, you don't need to worry about this when you're 16, 17, until you're 18, but when you're 18, it's good to keep an eye on your balances, and parents too. It's a good thing for you guys to keep, so that you don't start paying these ridiculous fees that the banks start to charge, because it really adds up and it takes away from your long-term earnings. So should we go on to the next thing, which is taxes? The idea of taxes, if you're in a business, you pay taxes on the difference between what we were talking about before. We were talking about income, which is what's coming in, and we were talking about it in relationship with the serving food. But in business, people go out and they make sales and they take in a certain amount of money, and then they have their expenses, just like we talked about in their business. And whatever is left over that is called the net profit in the business. Have you guys heard of that concept? From a working standpoint, in the catering example that I'm giving you guys, if you hired one waiter, and if that one waiter or that one waitress got, let's say, $15 an hour, and you were doing a bar mitzvah, and you had $100 to spend on the whole thing, just for your expenses, it would be $15 out of that $100 would go to that one person, and then you may have other taxes, and this is where it's called paying taxes. In addition to the wage that people get, the employers, who in this case would be you guys, if you were hiring the catering company, you need to pay another wage on top of the regular wage, and that's the payroll tax that the company contributes in. Have you guys heard of Medicare and Social Security?
Yes.
And you know, everybody talks about it. It's not something that you think about very much when you're in school, but when you retire, then people think about it. And so those are another type of taxes that you need to figure in when you're running your company. And in this theoretical discussion, we were talking about $15 for the 1 hour for one waiter or waitress. You have to add another percentage on top of that. That's going to be part of your expenses. And when it says that there's a consequence of not paying, if you hire a person in a company situation, not a friend, if you're giving someone babysitting money and you're paying them something, that's not really what we're talking about here. But in a business situation, if you hire people and you don't pay them their taxes, their contribution of their taxes towards Medicare and Social Security, and also their deductions, that's actually a crime. And it's a crime that you can, you're not going to necessarily go to jail for it, but you probably would have penalties against you for doing that. And I see your hand is up.
Yeah, don't you have to pay taxes when you get a check for working?
Well, you're right. You as the worker, you can have taxes withheld from your check. So if you're the worker, in the example we were talking about, yes, absolutely. If you get $15 an hour, they may take a percentage of Medicare and Social Security. Social Security, they would take 6.2%. It's just a percentage. Medicare is 1.45%. And these are just numbers that they would take out of your check. So out of your $15, they would subtract those amounts of money, and then they would also ask you, what are you going to make for the whole year? Because they want you to contribute towards your federal income tax. And they would ask you, what are you going to make for your state income tax? And for most people, it's very, very easy. You just go in and you say, I'm going to earn $10 an hour for 1 day. And I'm going to get $100 for the year. And they're going to say, all right, you don't need to take out any federal taxes or state taxes, because at the end of the year, you're not going to owe anything. If you earn $100 for the year, you're going to be okay. But you'll still pay a contribution towards your Social Security and towards your Medicare tax. So the employer has to figure this out, and they hire accountants or payroll clerks to do all that. And then they make contributions on the other side of the wage too. That's what I was explaining before. It gets a little bit complicated. But all these things are deductions. All of the things we're talking about in terms of the wages are deductions. And what's left after that, if you have your catering company for $100 and it cost you $20 to hire the one person, and then let's say the food was another $20, let's say you were left with the $60, there would be a portion of tax that you would pay on that $60 for your business. So that's kind of the companies that they otherwise would not be able to own if the companies are public companies. And like the largest company in the world is probably Apple. And most of you guys probably have heard of Apple, and you probably have iPhones and iMacs or whatever. How many people have heard of Apple? Has everybody heard of Apple? You all have? Do you guys know that it's the largest public corporation in the world?
Yes.
It's pretty amazing. And it was, you know, like 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't necessarily so big, but it's gigantic now. So if any of you guys would want to buy shares of Apple stock, and I'm trying to remember, does anybody know what the stock is selling for?
150.
Yeah. You're saying 150?
176.
176, you're pulling it off of the stock market report. That's great. So the thing is, you guys, if you were to buy one share of Apple stock, which is selling at $176 today, they're saying here, like, choosing what to invest in, and then the risk of investing. The risk of investing is whatever stock you guys choose, and I think Apple is like a really great example of one. There's a possibility that the stock could go down from 176 to a lower amount, and you could lose some of your principal in that. But there's also a possibility it could go way up, and if it did, you guys would do very well on that. So let me answer your question.
Okay, so if we were to invest $176 in Apple,
right,
then stock, I guess, isn't doing well.
Right.
You would probably lose that money, right?
the day that you never lose it until the day you guys decide to sell. So I want to make sure everybody knows that, because sometimes people get really, really upset when the stock market goes down. They say, oh my God, I just lost all this money. You really didn't lose it. It really is on paper until the day that you go to sell the stock. That's the real day. That's your real day of coming. So you can hold on, hopefully, and you guys invest wisely so that you don't have to sell it just because it goes down. You can hold your stock and wait, and then it will hopefully go back up again, and you can make a profit on that, and then you'll have to pay taxes like we were talking about in the other example, but that's good. I want to make sure I answer any questions you guys have about business or anything else. Is there anything you guys want to ask? Or not really? Or yeah?
So if I were to buy like one stock of Apple, it would cost me $170.
One share. One
Oh,
share of it. Yeah, it would cost you $176 today. And you know what? That price could even fluctuate during the daytime, right? Like if you look at the high and the low of the day, even in today, it might be up and down, 20 or 30 or 40 cents. There could be a difference, but yeah, you could do that. That would be an example.
And then,
Yeah.
wait, and then when you sell your share?
That's
basically?
correct.
You
That's
could
correct.
sell it to anyone.
You sell it on the public market. You will go through a stock brokerage company, like you've ever heard of like the companies like Merrill Lynch is a company that's like well known for that, or Fidelity Investments, or Schwab, or Morgan Stanley. All these different brokerage houses, they'll do it for you. They'll buy it for you. You'll open up an account, and then they'll sell it for you. I will tell you that the S&P, which stands for the Standard & Poor's 500, has a historical rate of going up approximately, which I do. I buy it a lot. And the reason I buy it is that it's a diversified portfolio of the 500 top stocks, and they change too. If a stock goes bankrupt that's in this portfolio, they'll buy another one to replace it and put it in. So it's an index, and it's a very, very good diversified way of investing in the stock market in a very, very broad way, and you'll follow whatever the market makes. And historically, if you don't sell it the wrong time, you may make up to 8 to 10% a year. So if you held it for 10 years and you put in $10,000 in theory, and you let your dividends that come in, that's part of the interest, you could maybe make $18,000 to $20,000 at the end. I mean, that would be the total, so you'd make a profit of almost 100%. Okay, yeah?
When you have multiple shares in a company, when you decide to sell them, do you have to sell all of them at once?
No,
or can you sell
no.
like individually?
You can sell them individually, just like you're suggesting. In other words, if you bought 100 shares of a stock and you just wanted to sell one of them, you could do that. Yeah.
For each company, the like percentage to each share is different, right? Like Apple, you buy one, you might be buying like a tenth of the company, whereas like if you buy, or I don't know, great cookie stand, I would be buying like if I buy one share, I would be buying like 1%.
You're absolutely right. Yes,
Like,
yes.
It fluctuates.
Yes, it does. It does. It does. And it has to do with supply and demand to some extent, because everybody wants to buy the really gigantic stocks. I've been watching a stock. You guys watch Netflix? And do you know that that's a public company?
Yes.
And I've been watching that stock, and we buy some of that stock, and it's amazing. We bought that stock probably around $40, and it's probably up to like almost $200 now. And have you guys heard about stock splits? Have you heard about that?
We're gonna do a whole nother class just on the stock market.
It's good.
So,
You could do many classes
yeah.
on the stock market.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
So that's
we'll
gonna
do
be our
that.
next
Okay.
focus.
So is there anything else that I should cover, or questions, or Ruby?
Just that right there.
Debt.
Just
Okay,
really
about
quickly.
student loans. All right, student loans, credit reports, and how to stay out of debt. The student loans obviously is a wonderful opportunity for people to be able to go to college if they haven't saved up enough of their own money. And so the concept with that is that the government will provide a loan. You need to qualify in order to get the student loan. And there's certain criteria that they use, and I guess different schools are different. But the concept is that if you were going to go to one of the top universities in the country, and I guess that's the Bell, right? You could possibly be able to take out a student loan